like to welcome every listener. I am with two precious people, Dr. Jim Richards and his amazing sister, just 1 year, a little bit older, let's say, Pat Richards. And my name is Effie Lopez. I love you guys so much. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being with us. For those that didn't see first two parts, I want to encourage you. Go check out, it's gonna be under this, the links will be underneath this video in description, where they were talking, sharing their life stories, their heart breaks, how God delivered them from their childhood and all trauma that they were going through. And the second part that was dedicated to all holidays, how they walked through this, how they walked out of physical, emotional, spiritual trauma that got them to this point. You have to see these two sessions. And today we're gonna continue. I'm gonna ask them about the season where they were, when they were single, how did they maintain desire to even get the education, to move on, to live, to get married, to have children. When they were at younger stage, they had young family. How did that happen? Pat, would you like to start?
Well, I was just sitting here thinking about, actually about school age and school related things. We had an older half brother and half sister that proceeded through school without us. I mean, ahead of us, I'm sorry. And my dad and my dad's entire family was extremely infamous in this little bitty town that that we were raised in. All of my dad came from a family, I believe there was 10 children, and they were all alcoholics except one younger brother, and quite well known by police, by all the bartenders, by, you know, everybody knew my dad. And we became Curly Richards kids. Oh, you know, those are Curly Richards kids, and you know what that means. And so I remember in the 3rd grade, I had a teacher that had my older brother, half brother and sister in her class, and she had hated them. And apparently she hated me. She slapped me one day in class. And I really think that's probably when I kind of gave up on school. It really discouraged me. And there were things, I don't remember exactly the things that she would say, but I began to believe that when you were born in the kind of family that we had, you know, there were families that had things and could do things and could learn things, and then there was us. And so I kind of began to believe about myself that I didn't have the ability to learn. I just you know, we just were not a family that was smart and could figure out things, and I accepted that. And someone quoted to me one time the scripture, I don't remember who it was, but you can't change the spots on a leopard. And I said that kind of does it. You know, we're stuck. We are who we are, and I am who I am, and there's nothing that I can do to change that, which created this huge so I basically gave up on education. Now, I read a lot, which was probably the one thing that really saved me. By the time I left what they now call middle school, back then they called junior high, but by the time I left middle school, I had read every biography book that was in our school library, because I wanted to know.
You mean both of them?
Pardon?
You mean both of them?
Yeah, Well,
Small library.
there was actually more than two in our little bitty school library. It was pretty small, but I remember reading about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and all of the, all of the men that had founded our country. I remember reading their autobiographies and thinking, wow, they started out very poor. They started out not in good situations.
Yeah.
Is this possible for me? But there was nobody around me that I really had nobody that encouraged me or that told me I could. And so when our mother remarried, there was huge issues between my stepdad and myself. And to be quite honest, I felt like that if I did not remove myself from that situation, it would not be good. He never molested me, but I always felt like there was that option for him.
Right.
And so
he would have molested any of us.
He would have molested
in
any
the
of
right
us.
opportunity.
Physically, it was very interesting. My relationship with him was extremely interesting his entire life. Now, he was very brutal with Jim and our middle brother, beat him unmerciful. He walked in one day, me and the middle brother was just sitting in the living room watching TV. And it was on a Saturday, and it was late Saturday afternoon, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the car pulled in, and it was my mother and the stepdad. And I knew when my stepdad got out of the car, he was drunk. You could just, you knew it. And he walked straight in the door, did not say a word, walked to the brother, picked him up by his shirt collar and began to beat him in his face and tried to gouge his eyes out. Tried to get his fingers behind his eyes and tried to gouge his eyes out. And it took all of us to get him off of him. Now, it was interesting, but he never laid a hand on me. And I was really probably the mouthiest at that time, one in the house. And I would do sneaky things that I knew would irritate him. He would insist when he was watching TV, he would insist on absolute quiet. All the lights in the house had to be turned off, and he would insist on absolute quiet. I would crack peanuts just because I knew that it would irritate him. And sad to say, it caused my mother lots of hardship. But he would never put his finger on me, but I always knew that in the back of his mind that any day that could change. So I was dating someone, and he asked me to marry him. And although I knew at 16, I was only 16 years old, I knew that if I didn't get out of my home soon, it would not be good. And so I said yes, and I married at 16, and very quickly thereafter got pregnant and had our only child at 17. So that was kind of that dropped out of school and still had that mentality. I didn't feel, I can't say I felt stupid because I knew that there were things that I could do. But I just, in the back of my mind, I had this belief that I just did not have the ability to learn that much. And that really haunted me and limited me. You can imagine if you just feel like you can't learn how limiting that belief is. So Jim, what was your school experience? I know it was similar yet different.
Well, I don't want to hear no whining from you because there was David that was ahead of you. There was Carolyn that was ahead of you. Then there was you.
Yeah.
And then there was Larry. And then there was me.
That all went through that same teacher's classroom, and she hated every single one of us.
Are you talking about Miss Reynolds?
Hated us.
Are you talking about Miss Reynolds, the redheaded teacher?
Yeah, Miss Reynolds. Uh-huh.
Yeah, she hated all of us.
She hated all of us.
You
It was
know,
obvious.
uh, school, you know, school was not obviously, when you're poor, got all this chaos in your life, school is not much of a priority. You never study. Like I never studied because I didn't want to go home. So, after I'd get out of school, I'd take my books and there was a tree, a big old bush that I would hide my books under. Then I'd go to this bar room and shoot pool. And I mean, when I was real young, I mean, I'm talking about when I was in like the third grade, and shoot pool and play pinball machines and gamble and do stuff like that. So, you don't really learn a whole lot in those kinds of situations. I never really passed a lot of judgments about myself about not having anything to do with whether I was smart or whether I wasn't smart, because I was just thinking about it from the perspective of survival. When I would go in and fail a test, I mean, I felt bad and I felt ashamed, but I knew it was because I didn't study, and I knew why I didn't study. So, that really wasn't a big deal. When I was, after Pat left, I was in the 8th grade, and because of my age, my birthday falls in May at the end of the school year. So I just barely I was always the youngest guy in my class. Everybody was a year older than me because I just barely got under the wire. So it was in the 8th grade. I was 14 years old and really just, kind of fed up with what was going on. So, I wrote a note as if it was from my mother and I took it to all the teachers and the principal that said that we were moving and so I'd be leaving school. And I went home and packed up my stuff in a grocery bag, a brown paper bag. And I hitchhiked to another city about 15 miles away, wasn't very far, where my uncle lived. And I concocted a story that my mother and my stepfather were moving, and that I needed to stay there so I could finish out the school year. And so I ended up actually staying in school through the 9th grade. And so when they made me come back home and I got back into chaos, well, actually I went back home and ran away again. And then they made me come back home and I ran away again. And then finally the last time it was like, they were telling me that they were going to put me in reform school if I ran away again. So I came home and talked them out of it. And really that very night, I mean, I just spent the whole night convincing them not to put me in reform school. And I promised them I would stay. I promised them I would, that I would stay in school, all kind of stuff. That very night I bailed out the window and ran away. And by that time I was 15 and I never came back. So, no education, hard to make a living. And, so, for me somehow, and I'm not, I don't have any sense of why or how, there's a lot of things you look back at your life and you go, sometimes I thought I knew why I was doing what I was doing, but I look back now and go, I have no idea why I did what I did. But for me, it was more about staying in survival mode. So I didn't really think much about making any personal evaluations about myself or about anybody else as far as that goes. I didn't even, I didn't think much about a future. I was thinking about, when you're 15 years old and you're on your own and you're living, you're either going to come up with some way to have a place to sleep and lay your head, or you're going to be sleeping in a cardboard box, which I have done. And you're going to be trying to find some way. All you're thinking about is, how do I eat today? How do I have a place to sleep today? How do I protect myself from somebody out here hurting me or doing something, molesting me or doing something to me? And so I stayed in survival mode and really never even gave any thought to education, never gave any thought to developing my life. I just wanted to know I was going to eat today and not get killed today. That's pretty much it.
So when you moved to your uncle, you didn't go back to school?
Well, no, I did. I finished out that school year. And,
there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I said, they made me, so that was like the 8th grade. And so my parents, my mom made me come home. They had moved to
Right.
a small city in Alabama. And so I went there. Like I said, I spent a little while there and ran away again. And then when I went back to my uncle's,
Right.
I finished the 9th grade. And so that was about it. I think I went about 6 weeks in the 10th grade, but never, that was it. So I was out of school by the 9th grade and just trying to make a living.
Mm.
Yes, the year that we did actually move to Birmingham
Mm-hmm.
was a very difficult year. We almost starved to death that year. Our stepdad completely abandoned us. Our mother actually had a tubal pregnancy and almost died from it. We had no food. We lived basically on there was some huge pecan trees around our house. And had it not been for the pecan trees, we'd have probably starved to death. We ate pecan trees morning, noon, and night.
And had diarrhea because eating that many pecans gives you constant diarrhea.
Our stepdad's family did help us a little bit. And I think our mother's mom supported us.
Eventually, that was after a pretty long time.
Yeah, that was after we'd been there. But eventually, Mom's tubes ruptured and she almost died. And one of our stepdad's sister-in-laws took her to the hospital, and they finally were able to get in touch with our stepdad, and he came back home. But but it was horrible
but we moved around. Birmingham, Alabama at that time, that would have been about 63,
yeah,
right in there. That was when the racial riots were going on.
Yeah.
Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama was about the worst place in the country to be at that time. So we moved, we would move about every 6 months.
Yeah.
And so school was always difficult, meeting new people all the time. You'd go to a school that taught a totally different curriculum than you had at the last place that you went. So you're always trying to catch up, or you're always failing. You never knew what was going on.
And step behind. Yes.
Yeah. So, school was not a happy place to be.
No.
So,
my defense, by the way, let me just say my defense mechanism, and I don't do this as much now as I did when I was young, but it took me years to get out of this. My defense mechanism when I was young was to kind of take on I'll be how I want to be, and you can't make me do anything. And so, man, I got a lot of beatings in school. I mean, paddlings, from principals because you go in and you're at some school they're teaching curriculum you've never seen before. You go in the middle of the year, everybody's ahead of you, and you're going to fail. If you take so many times, I can't tell you how many times they'd say, okay, clear your desk, get a piece of paper, take a test. I'd clear my desk, but I wouldn't take the test. They would just say, take the test. I'd say, I'm not taking the test. They say, oh yeah, you are. And I'm like, no, you can't make me. And man, I cannot tell you how many times I got drug out to the hall, and man, they would just beat the daylights out of me. And I mean, many times they just literally get me by the shoulders and push me back into the room. And I'd go sit down, and they'd say, now take the test. And I'd say, you can't make me. And so, that was, you had to find some way to survive. And, everybody has their own mechanism. And it wasn't because I was tough. I ain't trying to say I was tough. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that was my only survival mechanism when I started feeling foolish. I never, like I said, I don't know why, I never passed judgments. I never said there was anything wrong with me. I never said to myself, my self-talk was never that I was dumb or that I was stupid. It was just always survival.
Yeah. See, I can remember back at 2 and 3 years old, passing self-judgments about myself. And I think that may have had to do with the culture of women. Just, if a woman just really didn't do much. um, finally, after I married and had a daughter and went to work in factories, that's how I basically, because I was divorced by the time I was 19, obviously, but I went to work in factories and was able to earn enough money to at least keep a roof over my head and food on the table. And women, I didn't even have a car. And women didn't get credit. Well, the first thing I did, there was a little store there. There was a little dress shop there in town. And I went and established, I opened a charge account in this little dress store. And I would let my daughter, who was 3 years old by this time, she could get one dress a month. And I'd pay for her one dress a month on the credit card or charge account. And finally, the older half brother, I needed a car desperately. I had an aunt that would take me back and forth to work, but sometimes that just didn't work out. A lot of times in cold weather, raining weather, I'd be walking Sharon to the babysitter, which would be at least a couple of miles, and then would walk to work. It'd be cold, it'd be raining, whatever. And so my oldest half brother said, I've got a loan in this little bank in another little bitty town. He said, I think you can get a loan there to buy a car. And it was such a funny experience. He took me down there, and it was a very old fashioned, the bank entrance looked just like it came out of a movie, an old Western movie. Had the iron bars and the marble countertops, and the president of the bank took me back in his office, and he said, now what does somebody as young as you, I was only, by that time I probably was about 19. Why did you want to borrow money? And I was only going to try about $300, which to me just seemed like a huge amount of money. Why do you want to borrow this money? And I told him, I said, I'm working. I've got a daughter. I don't have any support. I've got to have a way to get back and forth to work, or my daughter and I are going to starve to death. I won't be able to pay my rent, And he talked to me for about 15 or 20 minutes. In a few minutes, he leaned over, he patted me on the knee. He said, you seem like an honest person. I'm going to loan you $300. That was how I purchased my first car, and it smoked. Oh my gosh, smoke just billow out of it, and it was horrible looking. It was just an old junker, but it got me back and forth to work. And I was very happy, and I paid it back. If I couldn't put food on the table, I paid that back, because I knew I had to have credit. By that time I had figured that out. You have to have a good credit, or there was no way to climb out of where I was. And it's at times climbing out of where I was seemed absolutely impossible. But even with all the judgments I placed on myself and my abilities, there was still a determination about me. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And a lot of times I took a lot of really bad turns. I took I went in a lot of directions that were very harmful and very destructive, and not good for me and not good for my daughter. But I was determined. Even though it seemed impossible, I was determined to be a different, something had to be different about my life. I didn't know how that would work out. I didn't know how to do that, but I did have that determination, and I always worked. May not have made a lot of money, didn't make a lot of money, but I always worked.
So how long did that season, how long did it take? Let's say
long time.
Right. You started 16, you left home, you got married, you divorced at 19, but you have a daughter, you're working, you're gaining car, it's a blessing, but how long do you
I became a Jim
mm-hmm.
got saved. I guess, Jim, you were about 19 when
21.
you made, huh?
21.
21?
Yep.
Well, that would have made me about 23 then.
Yep.
And pretty quickly after he became a Christian, I said, I never could, I never could stand for Jim to have anything or do anything that I didn't know about. That was that was part of my dysfunction. I mean, but I'm thinking, I got to figure this stuff out. He's doing something that I don't know about, and I got to know about it. So, do what?
Dr. Jim, could you talk about it from age 15 all the way till 21? What was happening in your life up till that point that Pat is talking?
I was drinking. I was partying. I was a real party girl. I was the country girl queen.
Okay.
I honky tonked. I drank. I partied. I would go to work so hungover. Some days I barely could. But that's all I knew. That's the only way I had of coping with what was going on inside me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt very bad about myself. But I got up and went to work, hungover, no hungover, but I was very unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And a realization hit me one day. It was actually my daughter. And I looked at her and I thought, as hard as our life was when we were kids, I knew that I had a good mother. She made horrible choices about men. Mm-hmm. She had no self-confidence. I was angry at her when I was very young because she allowed so much abuse in her life and therefore into our life. And I thought about that. I was thinking about that one day and I thought, I had a good mother. Our mother didn't drink. She didn't smoke. She stayed at home with us. She made really bad choices about really bad men, but she was a good woman. And my daughter will not even be able to say that. She will not even have that. And it was when I began to realize that not only was I cheating myself, not only was I creating so many issues in my own life, but I was passing that down to her. And I did not, I knew, I don't know how I knew, but I knew she'd be the only child I'd ever have. I always knew that. Wasn't that I didn't want other children. I really always wanted several children, but I knew in my heart she'd probably be the only child I'd ever have. And I did not want her growing up feeling completely and absolutely abandoned. Mm-hmm. And she did. She would have a dream. She had the same dream for many years. And I think she still has that dream from time to time. She would dream that I died and that she would be completely alone. And she would often wake up in the middle of the night crying about that and would tell me about that. Mm-hmm. And I think that was part of my reevaluating my life. And of course, I still had no clue as to how I would actually change all that. And even after Jim got saved, and I got very curious about it, and he led me to the Lord one night in his little house. And it did. It absolutely, my life absolutely changed. But I still didn't know how to make life work. I still did not know how to, I still had all this heart belief about myself and about my own abilities. And I had no clue as to where to start. I just, all I really knew was that Jesus loved me. I knew that. That was an absolute fact in my life. I knew that Jesus loved me. I would look at Jim. Jim would tell these stories to me and my mother. He would tell these stories about little boys getting healed. Losing. You told this story about this little boy that got healed and took his brace off. And you'd talk about speaking in tongues. And of course, our mother was this sweet little Baptist lady that, and I remember we'd all had dinner one night and Jim had left and me and Mom was still sitting there. And Mom said to me, I don't know about all that miracle stuff. I don't know about all that speaking in tongues stuff. And I said, Mom, I don't even know about the God stuff. What I do know is Jim got something. I got to figure out what it is. Don't know what this is, but I'm going to find out. And it wasn't too long till Jim led me to Christ, and it did change my life. But it took me years. It took me years to take the limits off God, as one of Jim's book titles says it so well.
So, Dr. Jim, age 15 through 21. What was going on?
Well, again, survival mode was going on. I because of the need to survive, I knew I had to find ways to make money. So I made money the first time as a musician when I was 14. And so that became kind of my main stream of always having some way to make money. And back in those days, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was money. And so that was kind of what I gave myself to. And I would intermittently do construction work, various kinds of construction work, all this kind of stuff. I've dug ditches. I did every kind of manual labor that you can think of. But education still had no real appeal to me. All I really wanted to do was make money, pay the bills, have enough money to party and do what I wanted to do, So, it was, when I came to Jesus, one of the things that the big driving factor for me became purpose. There's to this day, there has never been a day of my life that I cared about really about success in the traditional sense. There's never been a day that I really cared about how much money I made or didn't make per se. I want to survive. I've always wanted to survive, but I never had these grand illusions of making a lot of money or that kind of thing. Survival is not about success. Survival is about staying alive. And that was just my core thing. But when I got saved, I knew I had this incredible passion for my generation, because my generation was not receiving the gospel. My generation was alienated from church, alienated from everything that was mainstream, so to speak. And so, I had this deep passion to make my life count and something for God and something for other people's lives. So that's where my first efforts and interest became in developing myself. I mentioned to you before we started, I'll be releasing a new book in just a couple of weeks, and it's part of my Leadership That Builds People series. And in this particular book, I start the book by talking about the fact that when most of us get saved, all we're trying to do is get out of the pain of our lives. And that's when I came to Jesus, that's pretty much all I was looking for. I was just tired of I was not only tired of the pain I felt, I was tired of the pain I was creating for other people. And so, we come to Jesus, we give our lives to Jesus, but the problem is nobody really tells us, because they don't know. Okay, so what now?
Mhm.
And so people kind of throw theological things at you, sermons and theological things at you, and some vague random order
Mhm.
that you can't connect any dots. You can't figure out where is this going? I mean, what is this about? And
Mhm.
so it was quite a journey for me to realize that God had a very specific destination for every single believer, and he had a clearly defined process for how to get there. Now,
Mhm.
let me say this. Let me say this is 2020, and in 2 years I will have been in the ministry for 50 years, a half a century. Now, y'all know me. I ask questions,
This is a moment to
and
celebrate. Thank
many
you.
people have always thought I was being contentious, or that I was being rebellious, or that I was being a smart aleck. But
Mhm.
when preachers would say stuff, I'd get to them after the service. I'd say, "Okay, you said we're supposed to pray. What does that look like?
Right.
How does that happen? How do you do it? What are you talking about? Can you show me how to do it?" And it really got frustrating that you had people telling you to do things that they couldn't show you.
Right.
They couldn't even tell you how they did it, because the truth is they didn't do it. It was just stuff they were preaching about.
That's right.
But
That's right.
once I discovered this destination that God had for us, and conversationally, not in a way to insult people, but I just want to find out. I like to gather information. So I would ask people, so what do you think God's goal for you is? What do you and people would always want to talk about their personal calling, their personal ministry, their personal gifting. And something about our society, and maybe Americans, because Americans are very individualistic. We're very much about doing our thing. That's different than other countries.
Mhm.
And so in America, there is, well, actually, around the world, because I've been all over the world, I've asked people all over the world these same questions. There is more of a sense of me fulfilling my personal calling than me knowing what God's call is and fulfilling that.
Yes.
The word church, the Greek word for church, all it really means is called out.
Mhm.
That's it.
Mhm.
And we think that church is a concept that was born in the New Testament. It wasn't. It was a church that was born with the nation of Israel. And the nation of Israel, when they were called out of Egypt, come out of the world, they weren't just called out for the sake of stop doing bad stuff. And, they were called out of a trap, a life trap, a trap that kept them slaves to sin, that kept them slaves to poverty, to shame, to degradation. But they were called out of that so that God could take them into something else. And where God was going to take them was to the land of Canaan, which is a type of what in the New Testament we call the kingdom of God. Jesus, nearly every sermon he ever preached was about how to function in the kingdom. Now, people turn that message into, oh, he's talking about how to get saved. Well, if you take his teaching about about the kingdom and try to translate it into getting saved, it gets convoluted. It gets contradictory and confusing. The kingdom of God is that realm that we enter into in our hearts, where first and foremost, we make Jesus Lord. So what you realize is, if Jesus is Lord, then the journey to get there is the journey of discipleship. And the very last thing Jesus said was, he didn't say make converts, he said make disciples. And a disciple is someone who is following the teaching and the lifestyle of their leader, their master. And in this case, learning how to relate to God the same way that Jesus did. Learning how to have that oneness, that harmony, that connection with God in our hearts. And then when you enter into that realm called the kingdom of God, then you start experiencing the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom of heaven is where all of the resources of heaven are available to us now. So the thing that I discovered is this, is that Forget about what you think you're supposed to do. Forget about your gifting. Forget about your anointing, all that mess, most of which is not even scriptural. Forget about all that stuff and make this journey. And the only thing that really, by the way, that qualifies you to minister to other people is whether or not you're making the journey. Because Moses didn't stand in Egypt and say, everybody go that way. He said, I got to make this journey too. I'm going with you, and we're going to go together. He was a shepherd. So, and we can get into any of the details you want to get into, but what happened for me was committing to that journey created, and in Polish, what's the word for serendipity in Polish?
Serendipity in Polish. Wow. I would have to just give you a whole sentence.
Yeah. Well, serendipity is where you're on a journey and you're walking a path, and on that path, you just find things, and you weren't really looking for those things.
Yeah.
You were just looking to walk a path. Well, see, we have reversed that, and we've said, I want to find those things. I want to seek first the things.
Yes.
But the Bible said, Jesus said, it's red letters, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And then you'll find all the things. And so everything about education, everything about developing myself as my character, my morals, my ethics, everything has been serendipitous to making this journey from coming out of the world and entering into that kingdom realm of connecting to Jesus as Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. As I look back on my walk, on my journey, everything I tried to make happen fell apart. When I was just walking along, just enjoying the journey. I have a saying, and I had someone make me a sign: if you learn to love the journey, you'll always be somewhere you love.
Absolutely.
And so as I've walked my journey and learned to love my journey, that was that was, I didn't think of it that way back many years ago, but yeah, it was just, I remember when I was wrestling with Jim from the very beginning. Jim always talked to me about, he said, I'll minister to the whole world. And I knew that he would. I just knew that he would. But I would often laugh. I said, he's going to be a world minister, but I got to give him gas money to get him out of Huntsville. But I knew that he would. I just, I never doubted that Jim would be a worldwide minister.
But that wasn't a goal. I want you to understand something.
No, it wasn't. But that's what we would talk about.
Obsession or anything.
No, but those are the conversations that I remembered. And so one night, you and I had, I can't remember. We'd just been together and been talking about, just our life and our journey, and to be honest, I was feeling jealous. There's Jim, he's going all over the world. He's doing all this wonderful stuff. I want to do something wonderful, God. I want to do something wonderful. And there had been a girl that had moved in across the street from me. And her and this man had moved in across the street from me. And I began to notice after a couple of months, the man just kind of disappeared and the girl was there alone. And I just had this feeling that she probably needed some help. I'd been around enough women that had been abandoned that I kind of recognized, you begin to recognize the sign. If it's nothing but just the way they walk, hanging their head and their shoulders drooping, you know that something's going on. And so I had found a way to make friends with her and got to know her. And she had actually broken up this man's family. And the man had left his wife and had moved in with her. and then they had been there for a couple of months, and he decided that wasn't what he wanted to do. He wanted to go back to his wife. So he had abandoned her and left her, and she had no money. She had no income. She had no job. She had nothing. So, and if I've got two nickels to rub together, and I think you need one of my nickels, you'll probably get at least one of them, and you may get both of them. The only thing I would refuse to do was I would not put the roof over my head, my daughter's head in jeopardy, and my daughter had to have food on the table, or if I couldn't provide that, I couldn't help anybody else. But other than those two things, so I would give her as many groceries as I could, and just, so she wouldn't go hungry, and had become friends with her. And I was thinking about all the wonderful things that Jim was doing in his life. And I walked over and looked out the window, and I just heard him, I just heard in my heart, were you happy helping her, ministering to her? Did that make you happy? And I said, yes, that'd make me happy. I'd do that 100 times over. And I heard very quietly inside, you're just an across the street minister. Mm-hmm. You will minister to whoever's in your path. That'll be your ministry, just whoever. Mm-hmm. And so that forever settled this need. Everybody at that time, that was kind of back in about the 70s, everybody wanted to be this big, important evangelist. Mm-hmm. And that's when many of the TV preachers were really, they were buying great properties, and they were buying jet airplanes, and they were traveling all over the world, and they were doing all this thing. And I used to sit and listen to them, and I'd think, oh my God, they can work up enough faith to get a jet airplane, and I can't even work up enough faith to get tires on my car. And it always made me feel as if there was something lacking in me. How did they do that? They never tell you how they do that. They just tell you to have faith, have faith, have faith. What does that mean? I spent years.
Well, you know why they tell you that? You know why they say that? Well, because they really didn't get there the way they're telling you.
Well, yeah, and
I mean, honestly, By the way, let me say something. Let me just interrupt you here.
Okay.
An interesting thing, we all view things in other people that like people can see things, around my life that I might not see because I'm looking at it from inside here.
Yeah.
Pat, this would be a real interesting experience for you. Do you do much of the put off, put on kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, a lot.
If I were you, I would suggest considering this. Maybe doing some put off, put on. I'm going to bet, this is just, I could be wrong. I might be wrong about part of it. I'm not wrong about the big picture. I'm going to bet that our grandmother, the one that tormented me, probably played a really significant role in your low self-worth, even though she was good to you. She liked that. She needed people around her to have certain feelings of inferiority. But one of the really interesting things I noticed about Pat, I noticed this from the time I was 12 years old, 14 years old, is that every man that she brought into her life contributed to her low self-worth. They always made jokes and cutting comments at the expense of her self-worth. And it used to make me so angry. I wouldn't say anything, but I would get so angry because I'd think, why is this guy talking to her like this? And why is she putting up with it? And, but my point in all of that is, wherever you are and however you kind of see yourself and feel about yourself is going to have a lot to do, with what you got. It has got everything to do with what you're going to have to walk out of. Yeah. And so everybody's journey is going to look different. Everybody's journey is going to be different. And we all feel like that, that somebody else has it better or worse than we do, that sort of thing. And the real truth is those kind of issues that you had, where like you judged yourself, all those ways you were judging yourself. The real truth is, even though that caused great limitations for you on an internal level, it didn't affect you socially as much as my dysfunction did. Because when you're in survival mode, you just leave a trail of dead bodies behind you everywhere you go. And so kind of the point is that it really doesn't matter whether you're like me, who's just going to bowl over. I wasn't necessarily mean to people. Every now and then I would be, but it wasn't about being mean to people. It was just about the fact that I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and nobody's going to stop me. And if you try to stop me, I wouldn't try to hurt you, but I would just run over you. I would just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. So I did a lot of social damage. So we're all just coming out of this, but here's the interesting thing. Man, this is such a paradox. Remember, when you're dealing with the heart, you're always dealing with the paradox. And so there are things that I teach people that's like, until they can see it from a heart perspective, they have no idea what I'm talking about. The thing to do, but they don't. But it's almost like walking a tightrope. And if you misstep, you'll go too far in this part of it, which is not really right or wrong. It's just too far and apart, or you go too far over here. What I'm going to say seems so contradictory, but it's a paradox. The people that really make their life complicated are the people that stop and try to fix all this stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you start going to get counseling for all this kind of stuff. Most people that go to counseling get worse. Yeah. You know why they get worse? Because they're going to talk about their problems. Yeah. They fixate on their problem.
Good advertisement.
You can't fix yourself. There's people sometimes tell me so often, they say, I enjoy your illustrations. I just can't relate to them, because it's a different life. But one time my brother and I broke into a place, and so the police came, and I think the owner of the place came, and so man, we were surrounded, and it was like no way out kind of thing. And so it was a stadium, and we really weren't trying to do anything really bad. We just wanted to go in there and get a Coke and candy bar, kind of funny. And so we did, and then we were sitting up in the stadium drinking our Coke and eating our candy bar, and all of a sudden, man, police cars are coming, and these people are coming in. So we're up in this stadium, and the fence, the from the stadium to the back wall of a baseball field, that's a long way. Yeah. And so, man, they were surrounding us, and so my instinct, again, survival. My instinct is I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna run, one or the other. And if I could run, I'd always run first, but if I couldn't run, then I'd stay and fight. So, man, it's like, let's go. And man, we tore out running to that fence. Well, I'm not now because I'm a lot older, but almost all of my life, I was the fastest runner in any school that I ever went to. I was fast. When I played football for a little while in school, which was, a year, it was just like, man, if they needed a long run, they'd give the ball to me, because if I got by you, you'd never catch me. So, man, it's like, I'm telling my brother, let's go. So, man, we tear out and we're running across that baseball field. We're trying to make it to that fence, and we jump that fence. Well, see, they can see us, so they're driving around to where we're going to jump the fence. And so about 100 yards away, you go into the woods, and we knew if we went in those woods at night, is a swamp, basically, nobody's going to follow you in there at night, because it's full of snakes. And that was one of our regular things that when the police got after us, go into the swamp. They're not going to go. And of course, you might get snake bit, but you're not going to get caught by the police, So man,
better.
we're tearing out across that field, and one of these guys is on me. I mean, he is on me.
Oh.
And he's a big old guy, and man, he's screaming and cussing. I knew he was gonna beat my brains out if he caught me. And so it was in the winter, and man, this guy reaches out and he grabs my coat.
Oh.
And you know, he was just gonna yank me down. Man, I just threw my arms back and I slid out of that coat. And I left that guy standing there holding that coat, and I just kept going. Now, that may not be much of a life lesson for a lot of people, but it kind of illustrates how I've made my journey, in that I'm almost never going to stop and try to fix myself. I never, if you know, I'm not going to stop and try to figure out what's wrong with me. You know, if there's other people who know what's wrong with me, they can tell me if they want to. You know, everybody's got their opinion about that.
We'll have that conversation someday.
Yeah, I don't care. All I know is this, is that if I keep moving toward the goal, at some point, I'm going to run out of that coat. I'm going to slide out of the coat of whatever my problem is. And it's not going to happen because I stop and fix my problem. You know, it's just like success in ministry. People, I get a lot of credit for being way smarter than I really am. You know, honestly, people think I really have, you know, got all these strategies and I work all this stuff out. I really don't. You know, I had somebody the other day call me, because all these ministers have been calling me, you know, during this whole crisis. You know, the coronavirus. And so somebody called me. They said, yeah, people have been asking me, so what's Jim doing? And he said, you know, all I could say is this hadn't affected Jim any, because he was ahead of this. He started doing this. He started doing what he's doing, you know, over a decade ago, because he said this was coming. Now, the truth is, I didn't know what was coming. The truth is, I didn't know what was going to happen. The truth is, I just knew where God was leading me. And so if we just follow him with all of our heart, have no particular agenda, you know, we don't have to make anything happen. It's always serendipitous. This happens to me constantly. I tell people this all the time. You know, like I said, I'd love to take credit for some of this, but I can't, you know, I can take credit for one thing.
Yeah.
I recognize the voice of God, and when I know I've heard from God, I am going to do it. Yes. Now, that don't mean I don't make messes along the way. It don't mean I don't make missteps, but I constantly find myself just looking around going, dang, how did I get here? This is all working out. Everything's working out. Well, it's not working out because I'm not smart. It's not working out because I fixed whatever my problem was that was holding me back. It's working out just because I kept moving forward. So, you know, every class I've ever taken, I have never taken a class or gone to school to get a degree. I didn't even care about education. That was not even the point. The point is, will this make me more effective at helping other people to make this journey? Because if you got a shepherd's heart,
yes,
you're always making the journey, but you're always looking for, how can I help other people make this journey?
Right motives, yes. And
so every decision just kind of gets made because you've made up your mind where you're going. You know, and that's about it. That's real complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically, it's been, particularly in about the last 15 years, that has come to be in my life. I want to know who God is. I want to know who God is in me. I want to know, I just want to walk the journey. And I talk to a lot of people, and I tell them about little surprise packages. That's part of my story that I find on my journey. And everything that's really worked in my life, I said, it's like I went for a walk one day and fell into a ditch and fell into this wonderful place that I am. And, you know, I had absolutely no clue, no idea that that I would wind up here. Even becoming a heart physics coach for me was never a plan. It never dawned on me. I just did all the programs. They worked. I read all the books. You know, I did all the things. And one day Jim said, you know, I'm getting all these phone calls. I'm getting so many phone calls and emails that I can't answer them all anymore. Can you help me out? Sure. You know, and that led to this, where I'm at today. And yeah, we just walk with God. We spend time with God. We get in that quiet place with God, and He'll take us. And I want to tell you, Jim, because of your journey, and because, you know, you've talked about being in this place, this having I groups in your home, and having, you know, and doing everything on the internet, and this has been such little strain for me. Yeah. Of course, I realize that, you know, people that have got kids and that kind of thing, it's yeah. Abby's got 3 teenagers in her house, is probably.
Yeah, we might have to do an intervention. We might have to do a drug intervention for her if this goes on much longer.
Yeah. Let me show you something. She probably wants drugs right now. Not.
Let me show you something. Know,
but yeah, so I know that it's a little different.
Oh.
This right here is an antique Gibson Les Paul. You can see the headstock on it there.
Uh-huh.
Now, these old I don't even know how much these things are worth.
Uh-huh.
You know, I've never tried to use my faith to get anything.
Mm-hmm.
You just use faith to make the journey. You know, when I got saved, I was in this drug deal with some pretty serious people, and when I decided I was not going to do my part of the drug deal, I had to buy my way out. Well, to buy my way out, I had to sell my vehicle. I had to sell all of my musical equipment, and, you know, come up with the money to pay these guys off. Even though I didn't ever take the drugs that I was going to sell. Mm-hmm. I just had made a commitment, so I had to pay my end. You know what I mean? And so I sold a Gibson Les Paul that's identical to that one. And at the time, it would have been worth about $1,500 to $2,000 at the time, which in today's money would be worth about $8,000, mm-hmm. $6,000 to $8,000. And man, I didn't regret doing it, because I'm not going to do the drug deal, so I'm getting out of that. But I remember just saying to the Lord when I did that, I said, all right, you know, I'd like to have another, you know, I hate to have to sell this guitar for this reason. So I'd like to have another guitar like that if it ever happens, if the opportunity is ever there. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that was like the extent of anything that I ever prayed about it. Thought, you know, every now and then it would cross my mind. It's like, man, I would think, you know, I wish I had the guitar today. You know, I'd be playing somewhere and I'd want that particular guitar to play. Well, you know, when you're making this journey, so you're just serving people along the way. Opportunities come. You don't plan them. You don't strategize them. They're just there. Hmm. So, you know, there was a guy that needed some money, and I helped him out, mm-hmm. and really never expected to get the money back. Mm-hmm. And so one day he brought that guitar with the neck off of it. It was just kind of broken to pieces. Mm-hmm. He said, you know what? He said, I can't pay you back. He said, but I'd like to at least give you this old junk guitar, just a way to say thank you. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when I saw it, I thought, man, that is almost the identical guitar that I sold all those years ago. And so my friend Jimmy Bratcher came to town, and he actually took it to Kansas City, mm-hmm. and had it rebuilt for me. I didn't know he was going to do it. He just took it up there. Wow. And so, you know, the point of this story is like, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all right, you know, righteousness is not perfection. Righteousness is, okay, I'm just going to harmonize with who God is who I am. And then it says, and all these things shall be added to you.
Amen. I'll be right back. I have to show you something.
Are you? Oh, you got one of those serendipity things you're going to show us too, huh?
So you open the box. So.
Oh yeah.
Can I say short testimony? Just confirming everything you say.
Yeah.
Very short. See, he opened up the box. This is my heart. Talk about music, I'm there. Worship, I'm there. So quickly, I was the poorest kid at my music school, my high school. But at my college, I went with this fear in me. Oh my gosh, what if people notice that I have the worst violin? And the only reason I'm saying this is because my violin, my previous horrible violin, couldn't handle these concertos that I had to perform. Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Paganini, Beethoven, and all these composers. Again, I was from big family. We could never afford it. So this is exactly what Dr. Jim is talking about. God gave me these violin that were one of the best in college. Friend of mine made it for me, and the other friend miraculously paid for it. This is a long story, very short. God gave me this violin, and I have him till today. I brought him to US 17 years ago. I love him, and I will never separate from them. Thank you.
Oh, no.
Just talking about faith.
Well, and, and it's not, I don't want anybody watching this to think it's about things.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're just using this as an example, but the point is, it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter. Whatever you need to have a fulfilled life.
Yeah, check.
If you're just pursuing God, you're going to get you're either going to find things along the way, or you can get inspired to do things. Yeah. When I got a degree in alternative medicine, I can't even tell you how many people, and listen, it took me 9 years to get a doctorate, a medical doctorate, not in, allopathic medicine.
That was my question.
and listen, that was 9 years. That was 9 years of every night doing classes, getting up early in the morning, studying. And my only reason for doing it was because I had discovered that the particular medicine that I was studying had the best cure rate for getting people off drugs in the world. And I always worked with substance abusers so much. I thought, well, okay, if this is so good, I'm going to go, I'll learn how to do this so we can help more people get off drugs. It was never about getting a degree. It was never about anything other than just, I'm going to help people. I can't even tell you how many people said, you're getting off track. You're getting off track. I don't know why you're doing this. You're going to end up somewhere weird. Now, all I could say was, what? All I know is this. I know where I'm going. I want to serve God and help people. And this is what God's put in my heart. So we'll see. And so, the end result of it was just opening up a whole new dimension of being able to serve people and help people. By the way, you asked about from 15 to 21, when I got tired doing construction work, which didn't take long because it was hard, man, I tell you, it was hard. I did hard work out in the cold winters and out in the hot summers, and of course I played music on the weekends to make more money, because that's what my love, my passion was. But, so I knew, man, I've got to get at least a high school diploma. So Calhoun College, which is not far from here, they had a night course, a night school that you could go to. So I started going to this night school. Well, this interfered with my life plan to be drunk every night. And so I'm like, man, I ain't got time for this, but I got to get me a at least, some type of high school diploma or GED or something. So one night the teacher was out sick, and I went to class, and everybody, all the students were there. So everybody left. And I thought, well, I'm going to stay for a few minutes. So when everybody left, I broke into his closet where all of the material was stored.
Okay.
I got the answers for every test through all of the 10th grade, through all of the 11th grade, and through all of the 12th grade.
Is he alive? Let's call him.
And in 6 weeks, I took all those tests and had a high school diploma. But the problem was I still didn't know anything.
I wondered how you did that.
But I still only had like a 9th grade education.
Yeah, I got my GED the old-fashioned hard way.
Back in those days, I didn't do things the hard way. But then when I got saved and wanted to start helping people, listen, when I was 21, I went and enrolled in college. The first day, I almost broke down crying. Oh, man. It was so humiliating that I had no idea. It was in an English class. I had no idea what they were talking about. I mean, they're talking about this stuff. I'm 21. I'm in there with all these people, all these kids that are like 18. They all know what's 17, 18. They all know what's going on. They're all doing their work. And I'm sitting there going, I'm going to have to do what I did when I was in school and just refuse to take this test and get beat again because I have no idea. I mean, it was a horrible, humiliating experience, at my age as an adult to go back to school and just take forever to catch up. But it was part of where I was going. If I wanted to do some of the things I wanted to do to serve people, then I had to develop some skills.
And you developed a lot of skills, Jim, and I'm very thankful that you did. Heart physics has been how I've taken that I can help people, inspire people, engage people, encourage people to find their own answers.
Yeah.
I've stopped being codependent. Took me a minute to stop being codependent, but and quit trying to fix myself and quit trying to fix others. But I can help people find their own answers through heart physics, and I'm so grateful, so grateful.
So I saw you writing there, Abby. What you got? You got some questions?
Yes, I have tons of questions.
Okay, let's let her run through some questions, and we'll give her short answers.
Before Pat, I'd like you to share some significant experience that you had in your life. And I also, before we close, I would like to ask Dr. Jim to tell us how he met Brenda. And how did you guys get married? What was the age? What was their circumstances? And also tell us, were you in ministry when you met her? Or she was first? Who was first, ministry or Brenda? But Pat, would you like to go first?
You wanted to know something significant?
Yes, something significant. I understand you had very sad situation. You got divorced at age of 19.
Yes. And and I did remarry, and
yes,
about 15 years ago, my entire life fell apart.
Yes.
My then husband got up one morning and said, "I'm done." I mean, just kind of pretty much out of the clear blue, "I'm done." My daughter moved with all of my grandkids, moved away. Our mother passed on a Wednesday. We buried her on a Saturday, and the brother between us was dead by the next morning. All of that happened in about 8 months' time somewhere. And then wasn't too long after that Jim had a very bad car wreck, and I was not really sure.
Everything at once.
That I was not sure he was going to make it through that. So my whole life, I felt like that I had lost everybody in my entire life. I mean, everybody was gone one way or the other. They'd either died or left. And so I had been working in a ministry, but I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I knew it wasn't fair to me, and it was not fair to the people that I was trying to minister to. I just couldn't do it. And I went to Jim one day and I said, "Jim, I've got to work, but I'm spending way too much time by myself, and it's not good. I had worked for Jim before, and I said, "Will you let me come back to work at Impact. He hesitated, but he said,
How long?
well, I'm going to release this program in a couple of months, and you have to promise me, if I let you come back to work for me, you have to promise me that you'll do it. And I say, I just lied. I lied. I promised him, oh yes, Jim, I'll do this program, not knowing what I was promising, not knowing what the heck he was talking about, not knowing anything about this program or what it was supposed to do or how it was supposed to help. And so I just lied. And finally, after working several months there, and I really, looking back, I'm so grateful that he did let me come back to work for him. There were two older ladies there that worked with me, and I say I cried every day. Every single day I had tears in my eyes, every day. And somebody asked me one time, well, what did Vivian and Miss B do? And I said, well, some days they petted me, some days they ignored me, just whatever was convenient for them to do, they did. And I wasn't crying to get attention. I was crying because I didn't know what else to do. I mean, my emotions were just, I just didn't know what else to do. And so Jim released this program called Heart Physics, and after a few weeks, he came back and he said, Pat, have you started Heart Physics? Oh, no, Jim, but it's the very next thing on my to-do list. Jim, and finally, after about 6 weeks or 8 weeks of that, Jim said, now, Pat, you told me that you would do this program if I let you come back to work, and I let you come back to work, and I want you to do this program. Mm-hmm. Well, I had been under such horrible stress and strain, and my adrenals were shot, and my cortisone was all messed up, and my health was beginning to really decline. Small things, but all of them were accumulating, and I was really getting in to be very unhealthy, and I was awake every single night. Every single night I was awake between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And that was when if I hadn't done this, if they hadn't done that, if I had tried this, if this hadn't happened. And one night I said, nothing can be worse than me recycling this every single night. Nothing can be worse than this. Heart Physics cannot be worse than this. Doing Heart Physics cannot be worse than this. But my thought was, this is what my thought was. I thought, I've been listening to Jim since the day he was born. How is my putting on headphones and listening to him another hour? God, you're going to have to explain this to me. I'm not getting it. I don't see how this is going to change anything.
Sister crisis.
So I started at 2 o'clock in the morning. I started putting my headphones on and doing the Heart Physics program. And after I did that for a couple of weeks, I actually started sleeping through the night. So, but that ended my doing Heart Physics because I was doing it at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Right. And so, and Jim was still coming back asking me, how you doing? How you doing with the Heart Physics program? So, but
We just said that.
So I'm just being honest here. I mean, Yeah. So one night I came home from work and I was exhausted, and I think every joint I had was aching, and I had been to the hospital a couple of times thinking I was having heart attacks, and it was just stress, and I'd had pneumonia a couple of times, and just thing after thing after thing, and I thought, I'm going to get in the bathtub. I'm going to get this water as hot as I can. I'm going to put it full of Epsom salt. I'm going to sit in there till something's got to stop hurting. Everything does not have to stop hurting. Something's got to stop hurting. I can't take it. Can't take this pain. So I got in the bathtub, and I wasn't thinking about Heart Physics. I wasn't thinking about all this crap going on in my life. Wasn't really thinking about anything. And I just got into that relaxed, quiet place. And all of a sudden, I heard within myself, it was no audible voice, but I heard within myself, you act as if you're facing this all alone. And probably for one of the first times in a very, very long time, I didn't go into the religious mode. I didn't start quoting scripture to myself. You know, oh no, God, I know you don't ever leave me or forsake me. Oh no, God, I know this scripture. I know that. I said, you know, that is exactly how I feel. And I had, because I believe, because I was very honest with myself at that moment, I had a great experience with God. For the very first time, I had always envisioned that scripture, God will never leave you or forsake you. I had always, how I thought about that scripture was, I'm in this room and I know that God is in this room with me. I know he surrounds me. I know he's, you know, I know he's here and I know he's never going to leave me, but I never saw that as Christ being in me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my very first experience of seeing and feeling and knowing this awesome power that is Christ within me. Christ within me is my hope of glory.
That was also my revelation. Mm-hmm.
I had this wonderful experience that looked nothing like all these verses that I thought,
Right. Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
completely changed my perspective about that. And when I kind of came out of that experience and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, God, if this is true, and I believe it is, I mean, I knew in my heart that it was true. Why is my life such a screwed up mess? Everything in my life is just such a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard very quietly from deep within, God created you. He knows how to access everything that you are. Now you have to learn how. You just have to be quiet and you have to learn how to access all that I am. And it's possible. It's not just possible for Jim. It's not just possible for other people. It's possible. Just come and learn of me. My burden is light. And so that was the minute that I made an intentional decision. God, I don't really know what that means. I mean, I couldn't give you a definition of what that meant, but my intention is I'm going to learn. I'm going to lay down everything I ever thought I knew about you. I'm going to wipe the slate clean, and I'm going to learn anew. I'm going to learn afresh. And that was the intentional decision that I made then. And I have not, and that's still my intentional decision every day. I say the day before I go home to meet Jesus, I hope I learn some wonderful something about him that I can just take off on into eternity with me. It's a fantastic journey. My journey from that day forward has just been a fantastic journey. And I love it. I love where I am. I love my journey, and I'm always somewhere, no matter what's going on around me, no matter my circumstances, no matter what's happening around me, my journey is fantastic, and I love my journey.
And if I may say to those that listen to us, if you have any questions, please post comments. Ask us, what is heart physics? We will send you, we will invite you, we will call you, we will talk to you, we will connect you, we will tell you the tools. We're gonna help you find what Pat and Dr. Jim is talking about. Yeah, Dr. Jim, let me repeat the question. Would you please share that significant moment when you met your beautiful second half, Brenda?
You know, I'll tell you a little bit about it. We probably need to do a whole program about that sometime.
All right.
There's a lot of twists and turns in that, but let me say this. You know, Brenda and I both came from a background of a lot of failed relationships. And so when you have had a lot of failed relationships, And, you know, and for me, you know, you guys heard me talk about this before. You know, I talked about growing up not really believing that I could ever have genuine love. You know, I was quick to bail on relationships if they're, you know, sometimes even if they started going good, even if they went bad, I just bail on them just because I had no capacity to be in a relationship. So, you know, what that meant was that all of my relationships were dysfunctional. Before I got saved, you have to realize, you know, my band played in the hottest club in Huntsville. It was probably one of the coolest upbeat clubs anywhere within probably 200 or 300 miles. I mean, people came from everywhere to come to this place. We were the house band. And so, you know, by this time I was making good money as a musician, and I was in the limelight as a musician. And I kind of, you know, I kind of had the reputation that, you know, that I was always going to have the best drugs in town, and I was always going to have, you know, there was going to be a party. Everything was going to be a party all the time, or it was either going to be a party or an explosion. You know, you just never knew till you showed up. So that meant that everybody that was around me for years was only there for what they could get. And I knew that. I didn't particularly care. I mean, most of the people that were in my life, it didn't even matter if I was in a relationship with them. It wasn't like I cared that much about them. They were just there. They were just kind of entertainment or something to occupy my time. And so, you know, it was just sex, drugs, and rock and roll for real. And that's kind of the way it was. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when Brenda and I first met, I mean, we didn't meet around any great big attraction, or there wasn't any love at first sight or any of that kind of stuff. You know, over a period of quite a while, and again, there's a lot of convoluted details in this I won't go into now, but just don't have time to do it. But over a period of time, you know, I began to see some character traits in her that I had not seen in any of the people that I'd ever been around or been involved with. And so during this time was when my kidneys failed. And so I was in and out of the hospital and had pretty much lost everything that I had. And even though I was in the ministry and even though I was pretty successful, still, you know, when you're sick and you don't know if you're going to live, that's not a real appealing situation for anybody. So, you know, Brenda was probably the first person ever that came into my life when I didn't have a lot to offer. I wasn't in the limelight. I wasn't making money hand over fist. I wasn't doing all these things. And, so, you know, that was pretty impressive to me, because most of the people came into my life, you know, when I'm on the upside, and either me or them, would get sick of each other when they weren't getting what they expected out of me. And so, you know, when people kind of began to manifest that type of narcissism, you know, I would kick them to the curb. It's like, okay, goodbye. So, you know, probably with Brenda, well, not probably, for sure, other than my mother, it was probably the first time in my life that I ever trusted that somebody actually loved me.
Unconditionally.
Yeah.
Right?
And so, you know, because of that, we started this journey that was really complicated. We both came from broken relationships. We both came into the situation with our kids, and we came into the situation with monumental financial debt because of my sickness, and additional debt because it was a while. We were married for quite a while before I got healed and before we were able to pull out of just a world of financial debt. But you know, probably, the greatest motivator in this life, I mean, other than the love of God itself, you know what I mean, that I was experiencing that as a believer. But, with Brenda, the dysfunction, so much of the dysfunction that was in my life, I had the motivation to want to be a better person, to want to be a better man, to be a better husband, a better father, because it was really the first time in my life I had anybody, honestly, other than my kids, that I honestly ever cared if they stayed or not. Like I told you, before, when we talked before, my thing was, I would be a loner. My thing was isolation, and of course, which was part of my survival mode. So, it really didn't matter how close anybody was to me. It did not matter. I mean, I could cut myself off emotionally from anybody, any situation, walk away, never feel. If I felt any kind of a twinge, I could bury it somewhere, and it wouldn't be in the forefront of my mind. And so that meant there was never anybody in my life that provided any motivation for me to want to develop myself. Mm-hmm. And so, with Brenda, in walking with God, I wanted to develop myself. But in personal relationships, I really wasn't that interested in personal relationships for a long time after I got saved. I wanted to treat people right. I wanted to be an ethical person and all that kind of stuff. But as far as really caring about whether or not I could really be close to anybody, it wasn't until after Brenda and I had been together quite a while that I was willing to open up that dimension of my life and let those kinds of things happen.
Mm. Thank you. Well, I think we have to do another session just where we could dedicate it to your story, you and Brenda.
Well, I've always felt like if I ever wrote my biography, which people have tried for years to get me to, and I just haven't. Mm-hmm. I haven't felt like it was what I needed to be focusing on. Yeah. I'd have to have kind of a series, because I've lived so many different lives. There'd be the part of my biography about before I got saved and right. Coming to Jesus. There'd be the part of my biography about at 28 years old, waking up and going to the hospital and being told I might not ever leave alive, and going through that whole journey, and the whole devastation of all of that. And then there would be the part of my biography of walking. When I walked away from the ministry, I never walked away from ministering to people. I never lost sight of any of that. I just said, I don't really want what church is offering. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this the way you want me to do this. I'm not going to be who you want me to be. I'm going to keep helping people. I just ain't going to do it the way you guys want me to. So, I just walked away. And so then there's that whole journey that kind of started with me and Brenda of taking me a long time to even get to where I was willing to say, okay, I will even be involved in formal ministry again. Yeah. So, I kind of have about a 3-volume biography, because it can't really be covered in one book,
Yes. Yes. So at the next session, I promise I'm going to bring him back. Pat, I will need you. I will ask you to talk about reconciliation, because you mentioned that you remarried, but I would like to hear more. I don't want to take too much time right now. And Dr. Jim, we will focus on that part as well. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart how grateful I am for your time, for your guys' time that you stayed with us and you listened to us. Can we finish together just saying, thank you, Lord? Mm-hmm. That's possible. I'm gonna turn my piano for a second, and just if we could focus for a second, just dive deep and say thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. We're gonna close with this. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you,
Dr. Jim.
Abby.
I love you, Pat. I love you guys. Stay
you.
with us. God bless.
God bless.